Welcome to the Jackson Street Cemetery. It has a number of names. It was once called the Colored People Cemetery. It was called the Allen Cemetery. It's been called the Cemetery Street Cemetery. Now it is named the Jackson Street Cemetery. I'm glad you're here with us. My name is Elvira Rogers. I'm the former city clerk of the City of Suwanee. I was part of the cemetery committee. We obtained the deed for this cemetery in 2014 when a lady named Juanita Meriday passed away, and her granddaughter brought the deed to the city, not knowing what to do with it. So after some research, we found that what is considered an abandoned cemetery becomes the responsibility of the city in which the cemetery resides. So here we are in the Jackson Street Cemetery. A beautiful place, very serene, very quiet. It's located on Jackson Street, right off Main Street in the city of Suwanee. It's kind of enveloped in the Old Town neighborhood, and probably some of the people who live here don't even know the cemetery is right here. But some amazing people are in this cemetery who had an impact on the city. Mr. Guy Meriday, Ms. Juanita Meriday were very involved in their church, the Suwanee Grove United Methodist Church, which was the first African American church in the city of Suwanee. Ms. Meriday was the person you called if you wanted to be buried in the Jackson Street Cemetery. So in her passing, again, the city has that deed. The community was like all other communities during the day. There were Black people, there were white people, and they came together as community. And in my conversations with people from the community who are my relatives, my husband's relatives, and friends, they say there was very little racial tension in the city of Suwanee. And the reason for that was they were all poor. That's the story. They were all poor, so they all worked together. The churches came together for picnics. Miss Meriday and another lady I'll talk about in a few minutes, Miss Grady Brandon, was famous for cooking collard greens and chitlins, for those who know what those are. So it was a great community. So some of the people who are here in this cemetery, Perry Daniel Sr. and Donnie Daniel, who are my aunts and uncle, were the parents of the first African American city council member in Suwanee, and his name was Grady Daniel. And Grady's wife, Mary Lou Daniel, we have a street in Suwanee named Mary Lou Street. Grady made sure that he named a street for his wife, and she just recently passed away during COVID season. Others in the community are Hoyt and Lottie Brandon. I talked about Miss Lottie. Mr. Hoyt Brandon owned a garbage truck, and so he went around and picked up garbage for people here in the city. Paul Brandon, Mr. Hoyt Brandon's father, owned land. So if you travel on Scales Road in Suwanee, in the Old Town neighborhood, all the way to McGinnis Ferry Road, Mr. Paul Brandon owned all of that land at one time. And Mr. Paul Brandon is in this cemetery. So there's some amazing people, some amazing stories here. Another person that I need to mention, an honorable mention, she's not in this cemetery, but Minnie Rogers, many know the name Minnie Rogers in the city of Suwanee. Grady was her nephew. Grady's mom was Minnie's sister. Another man I want to highlight for you today is a gentleman who, with strength and brawn, dug the ditches in the city of Suwanee. There were no sidewalks in Suwanee back in the day. And so it's the streets, and the streets weren't paved. So Mr. Evan Brandon went around and dug out the ditches with brawn and strength with a shovel. And there are records in the city council minutes that say the city council was paying him to do that service for the city. In 2014, at the creation of the cemetery committee, a collaboration between the committee, the City of Suwanee funding, the company, Shakora Foundation, came in and conducted ground penetrating radar here in the cemetery to identify where the graves were located, because many of them had stones. Some of the headstones are gone or never placed. Some of the cemetery markers, the lettering has left or moved. So we just needed to know where bodies were located in the cemetery. So now there is a GPS signal to a device in the ground to determine that there our bodies in particular locations. We were very excited to have that done. Another thing was that the community came together and donated funds to help to fund some of the work that was being done in the cemetery. If we can just pan a little bit this way, Grady Daniel's site is right here. This is the African American council member, the first African American council member in the city of Suwanee. That's just a little bit about the Jackson Street Cemetery. We have people in this cemetery who are veterans. We believe there are Indian graves here. Many of the graves are unmarked and there's just a stone on the ground. There may be Indian graves, there are slave graves here, and there are amazing people whose families reside here in the Jackson Street Cemetery. Come out, take a look, take a walk around, sit on a bench and listen to the birds sing. It's a very serene place. Thanks.